Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery and asks, what advice, if any, has the Minister received on the potential sale of Christchurch City Council assets to help pay for the rebuild of Christchurch?
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I received advice from the Treasury and the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority on a range of funding options for the rebuild of Greater Christchurch, to which the Government has committed $5.5 billion to date. Alongside the Christchurch City Council, I support the regeneration of our city, which will be enhanced by the development plan or the Central City Development Plan released on Monday. I publicly acknowledge the funding challenges for both the Christchurch City Council and the Government. Councillors and I have agreed to discuss alongside our respective organisations a sensible and achievable timeline and funding program for the delivery of the blueprint. I approach these discussions in good faith, as the thousands of city residents would expect us to do so.
Supplementary.
Just before I call the member, did the answer actually say yes, the Minister had received advice on the potential sale of such assets, or did it not? Because that's what the primary question asked. And
that's what the answer gave.
Order.
I'll repeat the answer.
No, order.
I'm sorry, if the Speaker didn't hear, I'll repeat the answer.
The order. The Minister will resume his seat for the moment. This was a very specific question about advice on a particular matter, the potential sale of Christchurch City Council assets. Now, while the Minister has no responsibility for those assets, he does have responsibility for any advice he may have received. Now, the Minister, if I heard him correctly, said he had received advice from both the Christchurch City Council and from CERA, from the Treasury and from CERA. But what he didn't, in his answer, say whether that advice covered the issue that the question asked about. And if the Minister could clarify that, that would be helpful. The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
I've given an answer.
Well, we'll order the Speaker.
He hasn't answered the question.
The Speaker did not hear the answer to the question asked. The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I've received advice from the Treasury and the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority on a range of funding options for the rebuilding of Greater Christchurch, to which the Government has committed $5.5 billion to date. Alongside the Christchurch City Council, I support the regeneration of our city, which will be enhanced by the development of the Central City Plan released on Monday. I have publicly acknowledged the funding challenges for both the City Council and the Government. Councillors and I have agreed to discuss alongside our respective organisations a sensible and achievable timeline and funding program for the delivery of the blueprint. I approach these discussions in good faith, as the thousands of city residents would expect us to do so. I intend to say no further on this matter.
Well, point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Dr. Russell.
I mean, the relevant phrase was a range of funding options in the Minister's answer, but what he hasn't made clear is whether that range of funding options included the potential sale of certain assets, which is the question in the primary. It's written down. Unless he's claiming a public interest offence, which I didn't hear him say, then he needs to answer the question.
I mean, if the Minister is asserting there's not the public interest to answer the question, that's absolutely the Minister's prerogative to do that. But the question is a primary question, and if it's point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I have ministerial responsibility for the recovery. I have no responsibility for the Christchurch City Council and its finances.
Order. The Minister is absolutely correct on that matter, and I pointed that out previously. But what the Minister does have responsibility for is any advice he's received, especially advice from officials. In his answer, the Minister has indicated he's received advice from the Treasury. The question asked whether that advice covered the potential sale of Christchurch City Council assets. Now, that is a primary question on notice. If it's not in the public interest to provide the answer to the question, that's absolutely the Minister's prerogative. The Speaker's not going to second-guess that. But so far, I just haven't heard an answer to the question. And if it's not in the public interest, I absolutely respect that. That's the Minister's sole judgment, not the Speaker's. But just to ignore the question, a primary question is not on. This is Parliament. The House deserves an answer to a clear question, if it's in the public interest, for an answer to be provided. Now, the Minister has so far said he's received advice on a range of funding options. The question didn't ask that. The question asked whether he had received any advice. It asked what advice, if any, has he received on the potential sale of Christchurch City Council assets to help pay for the rebuild of Christchurch. Now, he may have received some on that, may not have, but at the moment the House is none the wiser. And that's what's not acceptable. in this Parliament. The Honourable Drew Brownlee.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Sorry?
I thank the Minister. Eugenie Sage.
Supplementary.
Point of order, Dr. Russell Norman.
Mr. Speaker, just for clarity, because it was very brief.
Order. Order.
Assets.
I'm on my feet. The Minister gave a perfectly clear answer. Eugenie Sage.
Supplementary. When will the Minister be revealing that advice and the discussions that he has had with Christchurch City Council about the possible sale of council assets?
The Honourable Drew Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I have not said that there are discussions with the Christchurch City Council about the sale of the assets. This is a particular concern for the Green Party. It's something that has been ramped up hard by the Green Party. The people who live in Christchurch know that there is a huge amount of work to be done down there for us to get back, and they have a $5.5 billion commitment from the government, a plan that will revitalise the city, a number of other problems that the government are trying to work through at the present time. Sitting around angsting over what may or may not be sold or where the money is going to come from is of no use until there has been a proper discussion between the two parties. That will now take place.
Supplementary.
Eugenie Sage.
Is the comment attributed to the Minister in today's Christchurch press that, quote, the Council was going to have to find a lot of funds, but it did have options to deal with that, end quote, correct? And if so, was he referring to selling assets?
The Honourable Drew Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I was referring to the fact that the Christchurch City Council have indicated in their district plan, the annual plan, that they are prepared to find some, I think the figure is around about 600 million, with perhaps a further 155 million towards the regeneration of city assets. By anyone's measure, that is a lot of money. I admit you can barely buy a broken down railway company for it, but nonetheless, a lot of money. And when it comes to the question, second part of the question, I can't recall what the second part of the question was.
Eugenie Sage.
Mr. Speaker, if I could help the Minister, when he said that it did have options to deal with that, was he referring to the sale of assets to deal with the shortfall?
The Honourable Drew Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, there are a range of options. I note that the Council has so far opted for very high rate increases for Christchurch residents.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree that the $30 to $40 million in dividends which the Christchurch City Council receives annually from the trading companies in Christchurch City Holdings Limited is a useful revenue stream which would be lost or reduced if those council assets were sold off or sold down?
The Honourable Drew Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure a revenue stream of that amount is useful, and no one would suggest it's not. But in the environment where you have got a provision on your balance sheet that means the city is very financially strong, you do that largely, I suspect, sir, over a number of years to provide for the rainy day. If anyone wants to suggest that Christchurch hasn't had a rainy day, I think they'd have a very hard battle to win.
Eugenie Sage.
Does the Minister accept that several of the facilities proposed in Sarah's blueprint for Central Christchurch are bigger and more expensive than those planned by the Christchurch City Council, and that this creates a funding problem for the Council?
The Honourable Drew Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I think there are two things that are important here. Firstly, the Christchurch City Council made some provisions in their annual plan as they were required to do. I didn't think it was appropriate to use the Sarah powers to suspend that annual plan process, because there's a whole lot more that they are and have to do as a result of outside of the CBD and as a result of earthquake damage. So the placeholder positions that they took, I think, were perfectly appropriate. They could not run ahead of the release of the plan, but there is a plan. It is a very good plan. It's been well accepted and embraced by the people of Canterbury. And, Mr. Speaker, the member knows full well that there are around each of those proposals a range of funding opportunities that do need to be explored and will be discussed.
Supplementary.
Eugenie Sage.
Thank you. Will the government reconsider introducing a temporary earthquake levy as proposed by the Green Party, given that the City Council's equity in Christchurch City Holdings Limited is about $1.3 billion and the levy would raise almost this amount in 1 year?
The Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's not a levy, it's a tax. It's a tax that's going to be applied to all New Zealanders to look after Christchurch, if you believe the hype that the Greens say. The reality is the government is doing that. The government has put up $5.5 billion. If the Green Party want to say that they would support the $5.5 billion plus the extra money that might come from the increased tax, that's an interesting proposition. How you'd fill up the gap between what's planned and the revenue stream that is proposed is beyond me.
Question number 7, Jonathan Young.
Thank you, Mr.